I want to welcome our presenter for this hour, Noga Lasser. Noga comes from Steelcase, and I first met Steelcase back in the early 90s, and they're really truly one of the pioneers of office design and of modular office design and different ways of looking at office architecture. Really one of the most innovative companies that I've known. They have a great team of designers. Noga runs 2 teams of designers, if I understand right, Noga. So you've got a group in Munich and a group in Hong Kong. So, and you've just moved from Hong Kong to Munich recently, so, right?
No, I moved to Munich.
Now I'm thinking of somebody else there. This was somebody else in your team.
That was maybe Michael.
That was Michael. Okay, Michael was 2 years ago on this program. So I've got a long memory and sometimes it doesn't work. But anyway, yeah, really cool stuff. I'm kind of an architecture and design geek, so you can't do employee experience, and especially this human side of experience, without really understanding how design works. And I think for all of us here, this is a whole field that we've just begun to scratch the surface in. So, and Noga is going to share some really great and fresh new research with us. So with that, Noga, I'll turn the time over to you.
Great. So before I get into sharing our research, I will tell you a little bit more about what I do. So indeed, I lead the interior design teams for Steelcase here. I'm based in Munich, and in Hong Kong. I moved here actually from Israel 4 years ago. So for next time, you can remember that. And what we do is we design Steelcase spaces, so Steelcase branded spaces, and we call these spaces work lives because it's where we both work and showcase our insights and research about everything, work, worker, and workplace. And what's really, really cool about what I do, beyond the fact that really I have an incredible team and I work with great people, is that Steelcase puts a lot of resources into research. And though I'm a designer, for me, design is a tool really to make people's lives better. And so I get this really unique opportunity to take that research and then translate it into spaces that hopefully manage to make people's lives better indeed. So as I'm presenting, what I'd like you to remember or think about are a couple of things. First, I'm not a researcher. And so while I'm sharing Steelcase research, I probably won't be able to answer questions, in-depth questions about our sources or specific numbers, but all that information is in the research paper that Elliot shared, and I'm sure we'll be happy to share again if anyone's missed it. So there's a link for downloading that. And the second and maybe more important thing is I want you to think about what this means for the work you all do, and obviously for the work I do. And how do we translate this research into doing better, into doing a better job of meeting people's needs and expectations? Okay, so I'm going to get going, and I hope I managed to properly share this on Zoom. Let's see.
Fingers crossed.
Yep. Yeah, there is. There's a little note. There's a little button that says share sound. Okay, but now I can't see. Hang on, let's see if I can get my speaker notes. Okay, so can you see my slides and not the speaker notes?
Yes.
Amazing.
Perfect.
Great. And then Elliot, if you want to stop me at any point to clarify or ask something, please do. I'll try and go slow so you can kind of get in there if you need to.
I'll watch for comments that include questions as well.
Great. Okay, so welcome to Work Better, the new era of hybrid work. If it seems like this past year has been the craziest, you're not alone. Alan Sloan, who writes about business for the Washington Post, called this past year the craziest, creepiest year in both the real and financial world that he's ever seen in more than 50 years of writing about business. And that was actually after he called 2020 the craziest year. And think about it, right? We have a whole new vocabulary around work. Terms like return to office, hybrid work, the great resignation, hybrid collaboration. These are now topics that we're talking about at the dinner table, but probably just over a year ago, they were barely on our radar. And all of these disruptions have a huge impact on people. So employee trust levels are down. In fact, The Atlantic described this as a trust recession, which is a term I've personally heard over and over again in the past months and is quite disheartening. Employee activism is up, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, and employee loyalty has plummeted. And I know you all know that that's not a good thing. And since the pandemic began, we've been doing ongoing research. So remember, I was telling you about the research, so now we're getting into it. At least 12 primary studies in 11 countries. We've connected with more than 57,000 people. And each quarter, we alternate between surveying employees and leaders. Between employees and leaders to make sure that we're really getting a pulse on what people are continuing to experience, because things are changing all the time. And the most recent round of research, we surveyed just under 5,000 people in 11 countries, and we've netted out 3 key findings. Some are surprising and some quite validating. So people who like working in their office are more engaged, productive, connected to an organization's culture, and likely to stay with that organization. Number 2, which was quite surprising, is people are willing to trade remote work for their own workspace at the office. They're actually willing to work fewer days at home if they have an assigned space in the office. And this makes it clear that people's needs are not just about remote work opportunities. They want greater comfort and control in their work experience. And number 3, and this is critical, is access to privacy is really important. People want places to focus and collaborate. And while we're hearing all these headlines talking about the future of the office as a clubhouse and only for collaboration, our data suggests this misses a key need and doesn't take into account how work really happens. And we can get into that a little bit. So we've put together, and here's the video, and you have to tell me if you hear the audio. We've put together this highlight video of our key findings. It's quite short. So I really like that video because it kind of sums everything up in 2 minutes, but Now I'm going to get a little deeper into everything that you just saw in those 2 minutes. Since we've been taking a pulse of employees and leaders, some things have accelerated and been amplified. So we continue to learn more about what people really need and expect in this new era of hybrid work. And while hybrid work will look different for everyone, the office is clearly here to stay. 87% of people will spend some time in the office, whether that's 1 day a week or 5 days a week. And yet, people prefer working from home. And we have to ask ourselves, what went wrong here? You know, why do people prefer hunching over their kitchen counter or slouching on a sofa instead of going to the place that should be set up to help them do their best work? And I'm sure, you know, all of you can think of reasons. And it's also interesting to note that a huge number have no preference, which I personally found extremely surprising. But it's actually a really big opportunity. And while there's a number of reasons why people prefer to work from home, you know, avoiding obviously the commute and wearing fuzzy slippers, I know I have a pair, our data suggests one big reason. People are more likely to have a home office or a dedicated work zone at home. And so while my living room is not this stunning, that's kind of my setup at home, right? So I do indeed have a work zone at home, and I don't have one here in the office. Yet, at the office, more than half are likely to work in the open plan. They're lacking the comfort and control that comes with having a dedicated space. And at the same time, organizations are shifting actually away from assigned spaces, right? People at all organizations right now are reporting that they're losing assigned desks. And the reasoning, obviously, it makes sense because companies are seeking ways to remain more flexible as they explore hybrid strategies, but understanding how people feel about assigned spaces can and absolutely should inform how organizations use assigned spaces. And this finding was also quite surprising and reinforced that people are seeking more control and comfort from their environment. So again, when asked to choose between an assigned desk and remote work, more people said they would work from home less often if they had an assigned workspace at the office. And I mean, this makes a lot of sense to me because people innately crave certainty and belonging. And that's something that the way we work as in this nomadic culture, it absolutely doesn't provide that kind of comfort or psychological safety that people are looking for today. Here's another key finding. New hybrid work habits means spaces for hybrid collaboration and access to privacy matter more now. So again, all those articles about the office becoming a clubhouse, they're missing what people really need because of how work actually happens. When people make the commute to come to the office, they can't, you know, run home when they suddenly need to focus. And some people, depending on their situations, are actually unable to focus at home. And with the frequency of video calls and the elevated awareness that people have today to having privacy, people expect to have that kind of access in the office as well. And so hybrid is absolutely changing how people work, and they're telling us what matters more now since the pandemic. In addition, it's really not surprising that leaders prefer the office more than their employees, especially when you look at the likelihood for leaders to have access to private spaces. And it's important to note that leaders can't make the assumption that everyone is having a similar experience to them. And in this new era of hybrid work, access to privacy needs to become more equitable. And this all really matters because if people like working from their office, they contribute more, they stay longer, they're 33% more engaged, 30% more connected to an organization's culture, 9% more productive, and I think this is a huge one, 20% less likely to leave. And that makes the work experience, that means that the work experience can make a significant difference to both people and your business. So in the new era of hybrid work, what matters? And are we focused on the right things? Give me a moment to get a sip of water. So McKinsey research actually reinforces our findings. They found that elements like being able to work remotely, compensation and development opportunities are actually less important than employers think. What people really want is to feel valued by their manager and organizations, to have a sense of belonging and flexibility and caring and trusting teammates. So while organizations with really the best of intentions are offering people more money and remote work to keep them happy, those things alone can really create a transactional relationship. You know, I give you this, you give me that. And instead, compensation and remote work need to be part of a holistic talent strategy that also includes the entire work experience and shows people their value. And certainly, and this is where I come in, the workplace can be an important lever. It really is the body language of the organization and speaks volumes to what really matters to you. So throughout the pandemic, our ongoing research has revealed these 5 things that people need and expect, and we've updated these 5 things to reflect this new era of hybrid work. So we've elevated belonging, and I have to tell you all, this is my personal kind of #1 goal in everything I do. All our research is pointing to us, is pointing out how important the sense of community, trust, and shared purpose is right now. We've also elevated control, because people more than ever want choice and control over where, when, and how they work. And when it comes to productivity, hybrid work means we need to support in-office and remote workers more equally to focus, collaborate, and build relationships. And so this notion of relationship building as part of productivity is something that's especially timely now, as people need to rebuild social capital and trust. And comfort, of course, you know, the workplace today needs to compete with the home, and people really expect places to rejuvenate and support their well-being. And of course, it goes without saying that people need to be and feel safe. We've also netted out these 5 things that organizations need now. And while some were obviously relevant before the pandemic, some are new or have been amplified over the past 2 years. So coming in at #1 is certainly resilience. Overcoming adversity, managing constant change, especially true today, and continuous learning. Building a community requires making sure people in person and remote have a connection to the organization's culture, making sure that there are systems in place to listen and validate the voice of the employee, and creating an inclusive and engaging work experience. A sense of purpose, shared vision, direction and clarity, shared leadership, and social capital. It's more important than ever to build trust through accountability and transparency. And of course, innovation, it's always been important to foster creativity and the ability to take risks. But with hybrid work, effective processes are also crucial to make sure everyone can contribute. And that's not simple. We're going to get into some of that a little further, and I'd be happy to hear your thoughts about that later as well.
Noga, we have a question.
Yeah.
So Christoph asks, are there any differences in demographics in this research? Or maybe you'll get to that at some point. We're just wondering if there are any difference between generations or startups versus different kinds of companies.
So actually, and surprisingly, not huge differences. And again, that's something I'm not going to get deep into that, but it does show up in the research paper. You can see the demographics both by types of company and by regions. And so what was actually quite surprising is that these things are true, a little more, a little less, but really throughout the 11 countries that we surveyed.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, so hybrid work creates a new set of tensions for the workplace to address. Open office creates more transparency, yet people appreciate having dedicated spaces. People are craving connection and seeking privacy. Organizations are creating remote work policies to give people more control, yet they have to consider then how to create equitable experiences. And not everyone's role allows them to work remotely. Not everyone has the same work from home experience. Will new policies create a presence bias where people who are in the office receive more advancement opportunities? These are all considerations today. And while the workplace needs to be more agile as new work patterns develop and change over time, organizations also need to think about how they can use real estate efficiently, right? So these are kind of quite a hard things to balance. And again, are we ready for hybrid work? The workplace needs to earn people's commute. I really like this phrase because it really does a good job of expressing how the workplace needs to become a place that people choose and not a place that they have to go, because people have other choices, right? And so you want them to continuously choose you and your office. How does the workplace have to evolve to be a place that people choose? And here's some of the shifts that need to happen. Moving from being obviously mandatory to attracting people. And if you remember anything from this slide, let it be that. Instead of designing for permanence, it needs to be able to evolve as work patterns change. And while this isn't true for every office, as you saw before, many offices are predominantly open, and there needs to be more equitable access to privacy. Instead of being homogenous or repetitive, the office needs to be diverse, inclusive, and joyful. People need a range of experiences to have more choice and control and enjoyment throughout their day. And the range of spaces can help each person find the right fit for them and the work they need to do. And the office can no longer relegate technology to a certain room where it's fixed to a wall, right? Technology is now accessible everywhere. Every laptop, every phone is a potential video call waiting to happen. People need to be able to move, from workspace, from experience to experience, while including remote participants. And every setting, individual desks, social spaces, meeting rooms, they all are today a possible place for hybrid collaboration to happen. And so we're realizing that hybrid work is fundamentally different. And while a lot of companies had hybrid connections before the pandemic, everything has been now accelerated exponentially. And we're never going to go back to how it was before. And so the workplace needs to draw inspiration. We say from a new source, but I think we kind of we need to reignite an existing source. Adam Grant, who I'm sure many of you know, I certainly follow him on LinkedIn, best-selling author and organizational psychologist. He wrote, "A better vision for a workplace is a community, a place where people bond around shared values, feel valued as human beings, and have a voice in decisions that affect them." I think that's a really important one. And even when we get into designing workplaces, that's critical. The best communities are ones that foster inclusion and exude personality, where ideas are born, trends are launched. I always call this where the magic happens. This is what people at work need now more than ever. And so the workplace should really be more like a thriving community made up of diverse neighborhoods where people really feel belonging and purpose. You notice this word belonging keeps coming up again and again. I said it was an important one. And neighborhoods at work, kind of like the ones that people live in, can be a home base for people, for teams, for departments, or for projects. They should include a diverse, inclusive range of spaces that support a mixture of uses that flow naturally from one to the other. They become a destination where people feel comfort and know they can find their teammates and their tools and the things that they need to get their work done. They can be a destination worth making the commute for because they really meet people's needs physically, cognitively, and emotionally. So, you might ask, what makes a good neighborhood? And it seems super simple on this slide, but I have to tell you, this is really hard work. And I often say that anything worth doing is, of course, worth doing well, but it's also probably going to be hard. And so this is worth doing. We have to do it well, but it's hard. So hybrid neighborhoods, they meet new ways of working and expectations based on these three design principles. We call it the 3 E's: equity, engagement, and ease. And so equity is all about creating a more equitable and inclusive experience for all in-person participants, but with a design goal to eliminate the gap between co-located and remote employees, right? Just thinking about that gives me palpitations. Engagement, designing for a range of experiences that help people participate fully, focus deeply, and stay in flow longer. And ease, really all about designing a variety of intuitive, virtual, and physical experiences that are easy to navigate and control. And while every neighborhood has its own distinctive character, I mean, Soho in New York, very different from Shoreditch in London, there are 4 key design principles that can guide the creation of vibrant neighborhoods at work. And I'm going to get into these in each slide now. So me and we, spaces really need to be designed to support both individuals and groups and allow people to easily transition between both. Fixed to fluid, organizations, teams, and people all need more flexibility. So spaces need to be created with less emphasis on fixed architecture and fixed furnishings, and more focus on ways to easily adapt and be more fluid. Open and enclosed, there will be more collaboration in open spaces because of their inherent flexibility, but meanwhile, people want control over their boundaries. And while we don't all need fully enclosed spaces all the time, people need more access to private spaces. And braiding physical and digital, this is ultimately what hybrid collaboration spaces are all about. So technology and space need to be considered holistically, because that's how work is happening today and will continue to happen. What's interesting, I think, about all of these principles is that they're not separate from one another, right? They need to all combine in different ways and in different ratios in order to create the right workplace for the certain work that needs to get done, and depending on the organization. So as I said, we're going to take a look at each principle separately for a bit. And just as a city neighborhood has homes and shared spaces, new neighborhoods at work support both individual and teamwork. It creates a home base for teams with an organic feel, and the amount of space will vary, but the neighborhood really reflects that people do different types of work throughout the day. Most say they spend 55% of their day working alone and 45% with others, making it quite impractical to plan an office, as we said, for collaboration only and expect people to simply go home to do their individual work. Neighborhoods also help people make quick shifts between focus work and collaboration, and allow for people to learn from being around others, right? Because that's really important, especially as we're onboarding new employees. Fixed to fluid. Great neighborhoods evolve as needed when new people move in, when a new store opens, or think about how a farmer's market on a Friday can meet a weekly need for some communities, or perhaps a senior center becomes a daycare, as the neighborhood demographic transitions. And at work, change is constant, sometimes in small ways, like we said, people a new team member being added, or in more significant ways, a project phase has changed and there's need for more collaboration all of a sudden. And spaces in the new hybrid neighborhood should be modular and movable and multi-use and support different kinds of work and be reconfigured or easily modifiable, perhaps on an hourly basis, depending, or on a daily basis, monthly, or even yearly. You can have temporary architecture that then moves as your organization changes. And then think about how you feel sitting at a sidewalk cafe. And then think about tucking away in the back booth of your favorite watering hole. Both are good or attractive depending on how you feel and what you're seeking or who you're with. And the office is really no different. Collaboration in more open areas increases transparency and builds trust, but at the same time, privacy in the office has surfaced as one of the issues that has become even more important over the pandemic. And people struggled with significantly open office plans, and now after working from home, have become even more sensitive to the need for control over their privacy. And so a great office neighborhood would offer a blend of private and public spaces that make it diverse and dynamic. This is the kind of place that you would hopefully choose to come to. And yeah, truly, a truly immersive experience can use technology and space in a way that amplifies your engagement. For example, if you've ever been to the Van Gogh exhibition, where the digital and the physically, they literally wrap around you, you absolutely know what I mean. But just as urban planners are creating smart experiences in cities, hybrid neighborhoods at work need to do the same. Video meetings are a new norm. They're not going away. And everyone needs to hear and be heard. And actually, we realized this was, being seen seeing and being seen is important, but you can't have a hybrid collaboration without being heard. And, most of you here, or all of you here, are with your cameras off, but we can still do this webinar. But certainly if you couldn't hear me, we'd all be gone. And certainly with fewer assigned spaces, online booking systems can help people find a place to call their own, even if it's just for a day. And the technology needs to be easy to use. That goes without saying. And so hybrid neighborhoods really need to support teams working both remotely and side by side. And we need to both think and act like directors. So paying attention to cameras and acoustics and technology and lighting. And honestly, we found that in collaborations, you actually need a director to direct the collaboration, right? There needs to be someone in charge of making sure that everybody has equitable access to the views, to what we're looking at, to the content. And there need to be kind of rules of the game every time you join this type of collaboration. How do you leave your questions? Are cameras on? Are cameras off? Do you raise a hand, or do you write your question in the chat? And these are all things that are, we're trying them out at Steelcase, and I'm sure a lot of other companies are, but they make the experience so much better. Now, okay, you all know this, right? Communities, they're living systems, whether they're places people live or groups connected by a shared purpose. You can think of any group that you're part of. What is that group kind of congealing over? They're able to adapt over time, which is how they survive in the face of dramatically changing circumstances. And that's really what we need to build in the office. Which is why organizations should look to thriving communities as a model for the workplace. People are not static. Work is obviously not static, and therefore the workplace can't be static if companies want their many stakeholders to thrive. Creating a community creating communities at work is absolutely key to this. And it starts with understanding what matters most, both to people and to organizations. Are we ready? I'm super curious to hear. I've not seen any of you, and I'm really curious to hear what you think and what your questions are.
Thank you, Noga. I have a question maybe to kick it off too as well. I mean, you've had some, thank you for this presentation, and I love the research and the talk about hybrid neighborhood. You've talked about what Steelcase found out about what people want in general. I'm curious to know, for the people that are here, the companies that are represented, what are you doing to understand what your people want? And how are you finding that out? That's my question.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, this is for the group actually, Noga. So I'm wondering what everybody else is doing here.
Okay. Yeah.
So I can share. I'm Jeff Higgins, and I work for a children's hospital. And we have an ongoing relationship with an architectural firm that we've done lots of work with in the past. We created a new research institute. And so part of that, creating that building, there was an existing relationship. And so we worked with that group and started thinking about how we could reduce footprint, but also when we started to do that, it was also a push for how can we actually innovate in this space with the spaces that we have as well. So not just a cost exercise, but so one of the things we did was we worked with them to create a space, take one floor and test out space design concepts. So we remodeled a floor and did a variety of things, and we called it the beta site. And we tested out that space and had folks, we did surveys and observational research while people were using it. And so we got a lot of data on preferences, but not good data on utilization, because across the testing period that we had, people used that space in a variety of ways. And it was right when Omicron was kicking off and people were really hesitant to come in. People still did, but so we had this experience, we learned some things, but now we're wondering, we're trying to parse out how much of that is relevant to future space design and choices we need to make. So sorry, that was a long-winded example, but that's what we did.
Great example, and I think it's very honest and useful to hear what kinds of things you're considering there at the end, right? That the last bit is useful as well. Anyone else? Thanks, Noga. Sorry to jump in. I just wanted to, it sparked that curiosity. Anyone else have an example of something they've done on physical or our hybrid workspace? Okay, great. So my short follow-up, and then I'll turn the time over to Noga. I'm just wondering, how are all of you, if you have any examples of using design thinking specifically to find out and understand how people are experiencing hybrid work, returning to the office, any of this around working? How are you using design thinking? Any examples there that anyone can share?
Hi, Elliot. There are some questions in the chat, so it would be great if these can be answered as well.
Yeah. Okay. So you had, someone did talk about making a distinction in age and generation. I think your report talks about differences by country. Is that where the distinction is?
I do believe it's by country, but I think that in the kind of the notes, there's also a link to different demographics as well. But if not, I can certainly find that out and get back to this group.
Sure.
Yeah,
And-
I would appreciate it a lot, right? Because I think we had this conversation in our office, and I felt that different generations had different needs. So I would be interested, right, to see how, well, what the data shows.
Yeah. So we will put a link to this in here for you. Hang on just a second. I was just trying to grab that. Let's go back here. And Micah said, love to know about the data. Were these conclusions based on a questionnaire survey, or did you use some other data points? Maybe some comments if you know anything about how this was set up and designed.
Yeah. So we do surveys with specific companies, both online, and then we also do personal questionnaires. And in addition to that, we also partner with, I mean, you saw the research from McKinsey here. And I think in the research paper, it really gets into really what types of questions were asked and how then the information was extrapolated from that.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions you can post in the chat or unmute yourself and ask directly to Noga?
If not, I would love to add, just some tidbits from my experience from designing, if there's not another specific question in the chat.
I did post the link to the study, which you can download. So you can find that in there. Okay, I think Noga, if you had another comment, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so we have recently completely redone our Paris work life. It opened just a couple of months ago.
Mhm.
And I have to say that I think one of my, the things that you learn as a leader and certainly as a designer that you accumulate through the years, but that really hit home hard in this project, was how do you create a sense of belonging in a community that's not just about the things that you say. So how do you really, it goes back to inclusivity. There are a lot of organizations that talk about being inclusive, but how do you go from talking about being inclusive to actually including people?
Mhm.
And there's a huge distinction there, because I can say, certainly we include as a company a wide variety of types of people with different racial backgrounds, different ages, different preferences. But at the end of the day, if those people don't feel included in the day-to-day of the company, we're not doing our jobs. So one of the things that we found really useful beyond the surveys that we survey our own employees is to take groups and really listen to them and listen to their words. And then while doing our work, we would continuously bring back what they were saying. We'd say, hey, we really heard you saying again and again that you want your new space to be inspiring. So here, let me show you a few examples of how we think we've answered that need. What do you think? We had real conversations, one-on-one conversations in forums that encouraged discussion, as opposed to, me presenting, I'm the designer, I know, here's the thing. So it's really a lot about how do you bring people along and make them feel that this is not just for them, it's by them.
Mm-hmm. That's a great example, great point. I'm curious, as you're talking about this, because I know you guys do, you're in a design team, and you mentioned some of these things in there. I'm curious to know, how do you build and test prototypes at Steelcase? Can you take us through a little bit of that process, and how and who do you test that with when you have a product idea?
Absolutely. So I think we have a few streams, and certainly we have two different ways that we spark projects or product projects. So one is, of course, we have a marketing department, and marketing comes back and says, hey, we see this need in the market. Here's a brief. Here you go. And then design will start working on that. And then the other way, which is sometimes even more fun, is, of course, we have our own design exploration. So as a design team, we'll say, hey, we've seen this interesting thing. We're going to try it out. And we're going to take some time from our, these marketing projects to check these things. And so the marketing ones have a very clear stream of validation that starts from the brief. We interview A&D community, we interview facilities managers, we interview employees, and that really will start the brief. Whereas, of course, in the design instigated ones, it's really just the design team being like, hey, this is cool, let's try this. But then what we would normally do is we would first validate within the design team, hey, I've had this idea. Does this make sense to everyone? Does everyone think this is a good idea? And hey, here I've built a few prototypes. Can we all take a look at this together and start talking about it? And I think once we validate as a larger design team, and I think globally we're probably between 30 and 40 designers. And once that's validated by that team, we'll start, also we'll call in A&D community to validate, to test, to have conversations about it. And then, we'll go to marketing and we'll say, hey, marketing, look at this cool thing that we've started working on. Can we now start the ball rolling on getting additional external validation on this? And, when we launch a new chair, we'll have hundreds of people testing the chair for different aspects, is the cushion the right level of support? Is the backrest comfortable? Is the adjustability easy? Are the arm adjustments intuitive? Things like that.
Great. Thank you for that. Maybe just one more question here too, or comment. Micah was talking about and wondering about where the research goes next and when you plan to do your next study. Is it your sense that there's going to be any difference in post-pandemic work preferences for social identities within the workforce? How do you see that changing? This study was done, if I understand, end of last year. What do you see so far? How is that evolving?
So I think the thing that we're continuing to see is definitely the need for privacy and belonging. As I said, belonging comes up again and again, no matter what organization you're talking to.
Mm-hmm.
And so balancing again between organizations making their real estate smaller and instilling a sense of belonging to teams is something that we've certainly seen a lot. And I think one of the ways we've answered this that's worked pretty well is really creating team hubs. So teams have a certain kind of characteristic, they have their artifacts, you give them a place. So even if you're not leaving all of your things on your desk, your things will, you'll have a showcase for all of the family photos, or we've created these little tool kits where you can have your family's photo or whatever photo you feel is really the essence of you, and that's the thing you leave on the desk you're using for the day, and what makes it yours and what makes everyone know, oh, when I need to find Noga, I see her photo there, I know she's going to be there during that day. Mm-hmm. And I absolutely think that organizations, again, going back to what I was saying about spaces speaking volumes about what matters to an organization, more and more and certainly the younger generations are looking for strong core values and sticking to those strong core values and being transparent about those core values. And then, of course, those core values need to live through the spaces.
Mm-hmm. So thank you so much for your presentation. And I'm going to give everybody a 5-minute break, and then we'll start again. I'm going to be sharing some more case studies. I actually have one about designing physical workspace with BP that's in there. And I'll talk about the origin story about employee experience. Wouldn't you all like to know where this came from? So that's in 5 minutes from now. We'll take a little break, grab another cup of coffee or whatever you'd like to drink, and we'll be ready. And thank you again, Noga, for your time
Great.
today.
Thanks, Elliot. Nice to be here today. Bye.